Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Aldas and today I'm going to be talking about Renault and the recent allegations by Racing Point that Renault are using automated brake systems. Now these are very big allegations of course at this point, which are unproven at the moment, but they could have very serious consequences for the team and for the drivers in the future. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in today's video. I'm going to talk about the report that Racing Point submitted to the FIA, what it actually means for Renault and what the consequences could be for both the team and the drivers. Now guys, don't forget, if you do enjoy the content on my channel and want to see more, don't forget to drop a like, smash that subscribe button, and check out my social medias. Instagram and Twitter will be above. But guys, let's get into this. So we now know that after the Japanese Grand Prix, a race where Renault finished with a double point score of Nico Hülkenberg in 10th and Daniel Ricciardo, who was promoted eventually up to 6th after Charles Leclerc got his penalties, a double point score for the team, so a very good weekend for them. A 12-page report was released after the race, a few hours actually after the race, by Racing Point, alleging that Renault had illegal systems on their car. Now the FIA then accepted the report and impounded both the Renault's ECUs and both the driver's steering wheels as well. Now, the one thing I will say right off is that this will not be settled quickly. This is a very serious allegation and will probably go to court, meaning we could be quite a few months away from actually finding out if this is actually true, what will happen to Renault. Now, what does the report actually accuse Renault of? Well, Racing Point accused Renault of having a preset lap distance dependent brake bias adjustment. Now, the simple explanation for this, now I'm not a technical guy, so I'm sort of simplifying this down for you guys. If you want a really in-depth explanation, I will suggest go watch Mark Priestley's video on it. He did a great explanation on it because he really knows the ins and outs of this sort of thing and being in a Formula 1 team and that side. So yeah, definitely go check his video out. But the simple explanation for this is the brake bias is something that the drivers do within the car using settings on their steering wheel. Now, the picture on screen is of the Renault steering wheel, and you can see a knob labeled brake in the center, in the bottom left actually, of that little cluster. Now, this is done to shift the brake balance either forwards or backwards. Now, doing this can help a driver with either overtaking, looking after their tire wear, or even preventing his brakes from locking up. But at the end of the day, it's still the driver who physically changes the settings and has to judge for himself actually where the brake bias must be for that specific corner and for their specific situation, whether they're pushing flat out or trying to preserve their tires. Now, Racing Point alleges that Renault have an automatic system that's controlled electronically, which would give the Renault drivers the precise brake bias they need going into each corner. Now, this of course gives the driver an advantage because it means that he already has his perfect brake bias preset before he's even got to the corner electronically. Now, it means that the drivers are much more prepared. They don't have to waste time doing anything on their steering wheel. They can focus on racing and gain an advantage over the other teams and the other drivers. Now, one very important thing to note is that this is not a case of a clever development by the engineers or a clever way of maybe circumventing the regulations a little bit, because some amazing developments in Formula 1 like the double diffuser and the blown exhaust, of course, that Red Bull used, sometimes these developments sort of teeter on the edge of legal and not legal, and it's the clever engineers that interpret the rules in a way that makes it legal but kind of, you know, just on that borderline. But it's those amazing developments that really give teams a big advantage. Now, this is nothing like that. This is just straight up illegal because in black and white, first of all, Article 11.1.4 of the technical regulation states that any changes to or modulation of the brake system may not be preset. So straight away, you cannot have a preset brake bias. That is just illegal. There's no wiggle room there. There's no room for interpretation. It would just be illegal. And then beyond that, Article 27.1 of the sporting regulations state that drivers must drive the car alone and unaided. Now, this is why, an example of this is why we do not have traction control anymore, which was banned in the mid-2000s. Now, if these allegations do turn out to be true, and of course there will be and already is an FIA investigation, a very detailed and thorough investigation, which Renault are already prepared to fight, as they've said. A really big question, of course, that a lot of people have been asking is, how did Racing Point know about the alleged illegal system? Now, there's many different ways that they could have found out. I mean, number one, a whistleblower, perhaps someone that maybe anonymously or not anonymously told Racing Point and knew about this system that Renault are cheating. They have this illegal brake system that is basically helping them in the races, and maybe that's how they got some evidence as well, because the one thing, the FIA clearly have some kind of evidence, because they would not start an investigation and they would not impound the ECU and the steering wheel without Racing Point having any evidence, and a team cannot just file an allegation towards another team of breaking the rules without any evidence. So clearly the FIA and Racing Point had something, perhaps from a whistleblower. Who the whistleblower could be, I have absolutely no clue. I mean, the fact that it's a 12-page report, by the way, means that it wasn't a last-minute thing that was done over the Japanese Grand Prix weekend. This has been in the works by Racing Point for a while. So clearly the whistleblower, or whoever this person is, or however they got the evidence, this must have been from definitely a few weeks ago. There's no way they could have got this ready in only a few days' time. So who do we know that left Renault about a month and a half ago? A certain driver, Nico something. Oh yeah, Nico Hulkenberg. There we go. Yeah, definitely he's the mole. He's the whistleblower. No, guys, I'm joking. Of course, it's purely just coincidence that he's left the team about a month and a half ago. No, guys, that was definitely a joke. I don't want to get Nico Hulkenberg's lawyers on the phone anytime soon. Thanks, Nico. Love you, really. But again, aside from the jokes, guys, some people think it might be a member of the Renault team who may have moved to a Racing Point. It could be, but legally, you can only work for an opposing team after a certain amount of time in Formula 1, like McLaren's technical director James Key, who actually left Toro Rosso, but he left in mid-2018 and was only allowed to join McLaren in March of this year, so almost a 1-year gap. And the reason why he was only allowed to join McLaren in almost a year later is precisely because of this kind of problem of trade secrets, as it were, being shared between the teams. So I don't think it's very likely that it's an ex-Renault employee, unless this has been in the works, this system that's illegal has been developed over the past year and a half. But otherwise, I don't think that is very likely. And lastly, I suppose it could also be Racing Point themselves who found this out, maybe by looking at onboards and seeing something that just doesn't seem right, of the drivers not using the brake bias, and realizing themselves that there must be a problem, or there must be something that is aiding the Renault drivers with their brake bias. Now, I do just really quickly also want to mention as a side note that if Racing Point are right with their allegations, and the FIA will need to know how they found this out, because it could be the case that if Racing Point can't prove it was an anonymous whistleblower, and the FIA found out that Racing Point are acquiring Renault technical information illegally, Racing Point themselves could be hit with an investigation for espionage. Now, lastly, I want to talk about, to round off this Renault situation, what could be the consequences. Now, firstly, of course, there could be no punishment at all needed if they are found to be innocent. However, if the FIA accepted the report and the allegations made by Racing Point, they must have had evidence in the first place. So again, I'm really looking forward to seeing how the story develops, but there must be some evidence that the FIA have to continue with the investigation. Now, if they found out that for the Japanese Grand Prix alone, Renault had this illegal system, they could get just straight away disqualified from the Japanese Grand Prix. And going further from that, it really depends on how many occasions and on how many races Renault would have had this illegal system, and perhaps that's how many times they would be disqualified. So this could spiral out very quickly into a very big problem. And worse comes to worse, of course, if there is solid evidence that this illegal system that has been helping them with their brake bias has been around the entire season in 2019, they could even get disqualified from the 2019 Constructors' Championship altogether. But on top of that, you'd also have to call the drivers into question. Both Daniel Ricciardo and Nico Hulkenberg absolutely 100% knew about this as a driver. Of course you know about this sort of thing, because you change the brake bias all the time, and you wouldn't just not, suddenly realize that you're not able to change it because it's being done automatically. So yeah, Daniel Ricciardo and Nico Hulkenberg 100% would know about this sort of thing, and even their championship would be called into question. If you remember back in 2007 with McLaren, they were disqualified from the 2007 Constructors' Championship, but the drivers who gave evidence against their own team were able to keep their points in the drivers' title. And no doubt on top of that would also be a absolutely massive fine. McLaren, over 10 years ago in 2007, for that Spygate scandal, got awarded a $100 million fine. And yeah, this could be a very scary thought to Renault. Now, of course, this is a worst comes to worst scenario. Really this is absolutely the worst thing that can happen to Renault, being disqualified from both the Constructors and maybe even the Drivers' Championship for 2019 as well. But this would have a spiraling effect of almost dominoes, I think, falling, because this would mean Renault are already not in a great position. They're underperforming. They are a very big manufacturer team with a lot of money behind them, but not really getting the big results. You would have to say that the people running Renault and funding the Formula 1 project, they will want answers, and no doubt it could be the end of Cyril Abitable's job and perhaps a few others as well. And on top of that, and again, this is just a domino effect that perhaps could happen, you just never know in the future, it could also mean the exit from the sport due to financial issues. Because if you think about it, being hit with a fine, having also the embarrassment of being disqualified from the 2019 Constructors and Drivers' Championship, that's something that sponsors will definitely not want to be a part of. If you remember, Renault were also at the heart of the Crashgate scandal with Nelson Piquet Jr. and Fernando Alonso, and And after that, their title sponsor ING also backed out, which was a massive loss to the team. So sponsors will also perhaps want to take a look at the team and probably won't like what they see. And then you get to the final sort of thing about the cost of 2021. Already, Renault and all the other teams are putting money into these brand new 2021 regs. With the rules coming out very, very soon, all of this can have a very negative effect and could even lead to Renault leaving the sport. But again, that's just kind of a worst case scenario. It probably won't get to there, but you can never say never. Well guys, there you go. That is my video on the Renault allegations. Now, I really want to know what you guys think in the comments below. Why do you think this has come up? Do you think it's true or false? And what do you think is going to happen to Renault in the future? Let me know in the comments below, guys. And if you did enjoy this video, don't forget to drop a like, smash that subscribe button, and check out my social medias. Instagram and Twitter will be above. But guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.